Is there anybody here with us tonight? Can you make a noise to let us know that you're here?
Can't sleep? You came to the right place. Cozy in, because we have an eerie night ahead of us.
I'm Sydney.
And I'm JC.
And we are not afraid. I'm Sydney Miller, and I have been investigating the paranormal since I was 16 years old. My interest in the field, though, began after I watched my first episode of Ghost Hunters in the 7th grade, which really put me on this path that I am on. I spent 4 years as a tour guide at the Ohio State Reformatory, where I spent many hours leading ghost walks and ghost hunts. I also spent a year giving ghost walks at Landell's Mohican Castle before moving down to South Carolina, where I am now a member of South Carolina Paranormal Research and Investigation, who have recently been accepted as a member of the Atlantic Paranormal Society.
Hi, I'm JC Snyder, and I've been interested in the paranormal since I was very young. However, I've only just recently began my adventure as a paranormal investigator. Most of my younger days were spent in libraries reading the Haunted Ohio books, just based off from where I'm from. But I've been investigating for the past 3 years now at the Ohio State Reformatory. The reason we decided to make this podcast is because we both have a love for the paranormal, and we really want to expand our reach and share our knowledge and help others understand that they are not alone in the paranormal field.
So it is important for you to know that we are both experienced paranormal investigators, and while I wouldn't necessarily call ourselves professionals, we do approach everything from a paranormal investigator perspective. So while we may not be experts in all realms of the paranormal field, we are open to them, and that's what we are here to explore. So you can expect to hear from us everything from witchcraft to voodoo, paranormal tips and tools, real life evidence and experiences, and everything in between. Tonight, we sit down with Harmony Harris, a real life witch from Columbia, South Carolina, and she will help us dive deeper into the understanding of witchcraft. She has been an empathetic hearth witch for over 30 years, and her main focus is to bring the balance of healthy energy back into the home.
Welcome to I'm Not Afraid of the Dark, but tonight, witches on Halloween scare me.
So how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing really, really well.
So first of all, I would just like for you to explain to our listeners what you do, because many people have this cartoon image of an old lady on a broomstick when they think of a witch, and we know it's much more than that. So if you could just explain to us what exactly it is that you do.
Okay, well, yeah, there is a lot of misconceptions about witchcraft. I am a practicing hearth witch and a pagan for over 34 years now. So my spiritual path of hearth witchcraft, and it's also known as cottage witchcraft, basically focuses on the magic of the home, working with fairies, earth deities, devas, elementals, spirits of the land and within the home, and so much more. I'm also a hedge witch, so that's where the spirit part comes in, and as well I work in green magic. So I do a lot of natural magic within my path, and I'm an oracle and tarot reader and an empath. So all of this and plus more.
Absolutely. So can you explain to us more of what you mean by magic? Like, obviously, it's not some guy on a stage pulling a rabbit out of a hat. What is magic to you?
Well, magic is basically a natural energies. And those energies can be used to create magic from different sources, such as from the earth, from the planets, deities, spirits, stones, herbs, elements, and so much more. For me, it's all about tapping into those natural energies and creating a change within your life. Whether it's for just trying to, for example, you're trying to get a job, maybe that's a good way to use your energies as a witch to cast a spell. How do you want to say, and get that job? you know. But witchcraft is so much more than what you see on television. It really is. It's a individual type of personal path. And a lot of witches, like myself, have been doing this for a very long time. I've been on my path for about 34 years now. And my path has ultimately changed my life and helped me and times that I didn't think I would be able to, have hope in myself. So it is a very positive path if you take it that way, Sydney.
Absolutely. That's incredible. So would you mind talking a little bit more about the origins of witchcraft in general? Where does it come from? Who does it originate with?
Absolutely, I can. And there is Sydney, there's a lot of debate on this. There's a lot of scholar debate on this because each culture, each spiritual culture has their own kind of turn on this and their own spin. But there is really, in my opinion, with the origins of witchcraft, for me, it's been around what I've learned from biblical times, Babylonian times. It has been mentioned in the earliest records of the book of Samuel, believe it or not, which was written probably either 931 BC or 721 BC era. I'm not sure on that part, but it was mentioned in the book of Samuel that King Saul sought out a witch to conjure the spirit of a dead prophet, which was Samuel, to help him defeat the Palestinian army that he was going against. And he believed that Samuel could help him. So he had to find a witch to help him in this process. But it's interesting, really. It's interesting if you think about it, that witchcraft has been in so many different paths, such as Egyptians. I mean, Egyptians had the longest civilization there was. And they had spell books. Some people fight over this little area, either in 2900 BC or BCE or 1600 BCE. They had over a lot of books on witchcraft or their rituals, how they were initiating people, how they were performing their magical rituals and charms even before then. So you see, witchcraft has been around for a very, very long time, at least 3,000 years or so.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like the origins are sort of kind of scattered all over the place. And
it is. It all depends on the culture, what I've learned. And it's always been a debate on that. Always been a debate on it. But I find out that each culture has something to do with magic and the paranormal, and especially during this time of the year, you learn so much different things regarding this subject. You really do. It's so much on witchcraft.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely do see a link when it comes to any sort of paranormal phenomenon, and whether it be witchcraft or druids or Wiccans, all these different names we have for it. It's sort of all interconnected to this, some sort of paranormal activity that we're all trying to seek out here.
Absolutely. I agree there. I mean, it seems like a lot of spiritual cultures have always been fascinated with the dead and paranormal things. I mean, each culture, if you look back, you will find that, especially with the Egyptians. I mean, they had so much gods and goddesses. And if you look at how they did their funeral and their process with funeral, you will find out, oh my goodness, it's just so much. I mean, but it is fascinating. If you go and research and read a lot, you will find out so many things about different cultures and how they worked with the dead, or what they believed in regarding the dead, and so on.
Yeah, for sure. There's just this ongoing just fascination that people have with the dead, and even how they and some cultures it's celebrated. So like if you look at Day of the Dead,
oh yes,
and their celebration of in the Spanish and the Mexican culture, their celebration of the dead, and putting up these shrines to them, and hoping that they'll come back those first 2 days of November.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, Halloween was originally called Hallow Mass, believe it or not. And it was the Christians actually made this holiday, even though it has pagan roots from the Celtic. But you can see how all these cultures have their own turn on what they see and what they view regarding spirits and the afterlife and so on. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. So when we're looking at this, is going back to like ancient Egyptians and all these other early times of the like biblical times of the origins of witchcraft. We get to the 1600s in America, and we have these issues going on in places like Salem, Massachusetts.
Correct.
And they're killing people because they're supposedly witches.
Mm-hmm. I think honestly, and this is just my opinion, I think it was a little bit more political where Salem was regarding to them. But it was a big hysteria because you just got to imagine in the European countries, witches were burned. I mean, innocent people were burned at the stake between the 14 and 1600s. I mean, we had over 50,000 people, and this is including Salem and America as well. 50,000 women were executed for being practicing witches, supposedly. And then you find out with the hysteria between February 1692 to May 1693, okay, there were 19 people hanged. And this is regarding Salem now. There were 19 people hanged, and there was one that was crushed to death. Now, over in European, they used to, in those countries, they used to burn witches at the stake and even worse. But here in America, they kind of like, instead they pretty much had dunked them. They would beat them to death. Some of them would die in jail before they were even brought up to trial. It was a horrible time back in those days. I mean, it was horrible. The way it stopped, and I found this was interesting. The only reason why the Salem witch trials kind of stopped was because the governor at that time, his wife was suspected.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people don't know that, and all of a sudden he started pardoning a lot of people and passing laws and letting people go that were already in jail for witchcraft. I'm telling you, it was a lot. And I believe it was a lot of political going on there, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. But everybody else has got their turn on it. A lot of witches. But I do see, it's persecution. And even today in some countries, people are still getting persecuted for practicing witchcraft.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Even in the 1980s, mid 1980s, America passed where it was okay for people to practice witchcraft. Yeah, it's a lot. And I mean, it is like, wow, really? 1980s, y'all decided it's okay now that we can practice witchcraft? I mean,
That's insane.
It is insane, isn't it?
Yeah, so like, do you still get like weird looks from people? Do you get a lot of questions? Like, how do people treat you in 2020 when you tell them like, oh yeah, I'm a practicing witch?
Well, you know what? At first, really don't say anything. And once they get to know me, then they might find out eventually. And when they do, they don't have a problem with it because they get to know me as a person. Some people aren't that lucky. You still get a little bit of, oh, you're a devil worshiper. No, I'm not a devil worshiper. But most of that I do come across and are still my friends today. They respect me and they understand, and we have that type of communication where I can tell them about my path, and they feel fine with it. And they're kind of like, I'm glad you're a witch because I can come to you for certain things, and so on. So, it just depends on the witch, but a lot of people still, have to hide, and it's unfortunate. It really is that we're still going through sometimes those discrimination type of things,
For sure, I totally understand. I think as a paranormal investigator, we get that a lot too. Obviously, I meet somebody new, that's not what I open with. But when they do find that out, every once in a while you do get sort of some judgment, some silent glares and whatnot. But I think for us, it's been helpful because it's sort of what it's entrenched in society now with all these TV shows that are out there. But for you guys, I don't think people see that connection because they're not openly talking about witches and all these magic and stuff. That it's all been the focus on the science and the paranormal and the tools and that, but we leave out that other part that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of have the taste of what we actually, experience. And I mean, it's a mixture, but we have come a long way. Here in America and in some other countries, UK, we can be a little bit more open. You can look up on YouTube alone, and you will find so many witches that have their own channels, and they're talking and sharing about their path, because every witch is different, how they go about practicing and so on. But for me, I think when people get to know me first and then they find out what I do, they don't really have a problem with it, and and some people want to be educated nowadays about it, because like you said, there's a lot of paranormal shows out there, but you still get those ones like, you're a witch, oh, you're gonna cast a hex on me, or you get that a lot. And I mean, you get that discrimination. But overall in all, for me, myself, lots of people, when they find out what I am, and they're like, I don't have a problem, and we can have that open-minded discussion, and I can relieve some of those fears that were preconceived by history, because witches didn't have a good rep.
For sure. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. Well, it does appear that things are moving in the right direction, so that's good. It's good for all of us. I think the more we talk about it, the more we do things like this podcast and TV shows or YouTube channels or whatever it is, I think that's only going to help us look less like crazy people and more understanding like this is a thing, and we're just here to help people.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons why I'm here tonight, is because I want to educate the public, and I want them to know, you may not approve of what I do, but you know what? I'm out there and I'm spreading, I'm trying to help spread some enlightenment here, and let you know that there isn't anything to fear. Well, not with me. There's nothing to fear. I'm a practicing witch. I don't harm anyone. And I understand what I do. I do. I've been learning for a very long time. I had a wonderful mentor that brought me into the craft, showed me the right way, and I've been doing it ever since, helping people understand and helping all types of people from different walks of life, different religions. And witchcraft has opened those doors so I can help people. And I'm proud of that. And I will tell anyone that if they ask me, hey, any question, I will answer them with total honesty.
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, we're so happy to have you here and to help spread this message for you.
I am honored to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to switch gears here just a little bit. And there's some terms when we're trying to look into things like witchcraft and similar realms. So rosemary, quartz, sage, these are words that get thrown around a lot just in the paranormal field. So, and from your perspective, how are these used in removing or detecting paranormal activity?
Well, personally, every witch is going to tell you differently. But for myself, when I use anything, because paranormal investigators started coming to me like 2.5 years ago, or even before then. They found me on social media because I do have a page called Simply Witch. I have one on, also we have a page on Instagram. So we're on Facebook and Instagram. So people find me, and I've had paranormal investigators contact me and say, hey, we had something follow us home, or can you give me like not too long ago, I had some paranormal investigators from Central Florida contact me. They sent some of their footage from the home that they were in. Okay. And they were like, look, we think this is dynamic. You know, what can we do here? And I said, do you smudge? Do you understand that process? And they were like, no. And they wanted me to ride all the way down to Central Florida. Well, good thing that they did contact me, because I have a sister that lives in Central Florida that was able to help them get the information and be able to bring the Catholic diocese into the picture, because the family was Catholic. And far as I know, everything's good now. They did go through the house and cleanse it out and remove the spirit. It can be a scary situation, but I am now going into the field of paranormal investigating because it goes hand in hand with what I do. So, you know, but my thing is like this, you know, I'm going to continue to help out people regarding this the best that I can. Every situation, of course, is different, but I've always worked with paranormal investigators, and I'm always going to continue to.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the further along we get in this field, I think you're going to see a lot more merging of witches and Wiccans and Druid and paranormal investigators. And eventually they're all going to be the same people. Right. Maybe still go by different names, but we really do a lot of similar things, a lot of the same thing. And I think we're going to start seeing more of those things overlapping in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Because I'm already headed into that field. I've been doing paranormal investigating for 2.5 years now, and I'm still learning everything. And I use a lot of, like you were asking me about rosemary and quartz and all this. I use a lot of those things in my practice. Even when I go into a client's home, I will, every situation is different, like I stated earlier, and I will continue to use some of the stuff that I've learned in the craft with that as well. So it's like I'm merging two paths together, and it works out beautifully. I mean, you know, and with sage is wonderful, and rosemary are wonderful to smudge out the home, because sometimes these homes are left with energies. And energies within the home are a big thing. And that's why I'm a hearth witch, because I can go in your home and I can use dowsing rods, and I can figure out where all that negative energy is coming from in some situations. And I can use whatever methods, such as sage, or I can use a sage. I can use other things such as quartz. Quartz crystals are great. For everything. If you wanted to keep something out of your home, or you wanted to protect your land, you could bury quartz crystals at each corner of your property. Just different things. But yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, we're going to see a lot more merging, and it has begun, and it will continue, I do believe. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing for people out there to have these resources now.
I agree 100%. So we brought up some terms that I want to make sure are clear for our listeners. So we've been talking about witches, which you've made a pretty clear picture of. And we've also talked about Wiccans and Druids. Would you mind just, for our listeners, explaining what the difference is between what you do and what they do?
Okay, so I'm going to try to do this as quick as possible, but it is a lot to it, because there is a big difference. And I can understand how everything overlaps, because you watch movies and TV shows and so on. And I can understand the confusion, you know, why people would assume everybody does the same thing, right? You know, but the thing is everyone's different in the craft. And the thing is paganism is basically an umbrella term, okay? And it's used to refer to non-Abrahamic religions. I'm a pagan, and I practice an earth-based spirituality like many pagans do, and there are lots of different traditions within that, such as Norse and Druid, and Celtic, and so on. There's a lot that falls falls underneath that umbrella. And Wicca is one of the newest religions, actually, and because it is earth-based spirituality, and it was established by Gerald Gardner in the mid 40s and 50s. So, but the whole thing is that a lot of Wiccans and pagans, even though magic runs in our culture, in our roots, not a lot of pagans and Wiccans practice witchcraft, okay? And some pagans do not call themselves Wiccans, and some Wiccans, because it is a pagan-based spirituality, may call themselves pagans as well. But witchcraft is totally different, okay? Because witchcraft is not a religion, it's a craft. It revolves around the study of the occult and the study and the practice of magic. How anybody can practice witchcraft. You don't have to be a pagan, you don't have to be a Wiccan. You can be a Christian. We do have Christian witches. You can be Buddhist. You could be even Jewish, or you could even be an atheist and just practice witchcraft, okay? So you can bring your religion into witchcraft, or you don't have to. Now, I'm pagan, and I do practice witchcraft. So there is a lot, and there's many more traditions in witchcraft, and so on. So I mean, we have a lot of different practices within that as well, and traditions. And there are some that follow hearth witchcraft. You don't have to be a pagan to practice that, because it's witchcraft. It's a craft. So it's interesting, and it can be confusing because it does change. And some of us, like myself, I don't believe in labels, when it's regarding my path. But if I have to explain to somebody outside of my path, yes, I will use some terms and I will clarify what I do. But every witch is different. Every witch is different how they go about that, okay? But for me personally, witchcraft is a personal path. It's a lot of studying, it's a lot of practicing, and a lot of researching, and so on, and it's a personalized, individualized type of path. I mean, you're gonna bring in your morality into it, just like someone who's a Christian and is non-denominational. They may not be Catholic or anything, but they have their own relationship with God and Jesus and so on. They may not go to church, but they'll have their own relationship. And some of us witches are like that.
That actually makes a lot of sense into how different witches are going to have different practices and it's almost like you're like a recipe where you can have all the formula there and you can put in all the same ingredients, but it's never going to turn out the exact same way every time.
Absolutely. And some witches are eclectic. They borrow from different spiritual paths and practice their craft that way. There are set traditions, and I mean, it's wild. And some people say I'm everything. So, but I'm not kidding you. But you know what? That's fine, because you know what? Even with a person that is a Christian, the divine comes differently for everyone, and your spiritual beliefs come differently. And I think that's why people, that's why they misunderstand when someone says I'm a witch or I'm this, because it's a lot of misconceptions, just as we were talking about earlier about Salem and the witch trials and over in Europe as well. A lot of bad history, a lot of bad rep there, and we're trying to straighten that out as we go along, into nowadays. We're trying to set the record straight. We're trying to educate people, so that way they don't just assume, just never assume. If someone is a witch, ask them, if you have that type of relationship with them, ask them to explain their path, and you will find out that most of them will have no problem explaining to you what they do and what they practice within their craft.
Excellent. So you brought up earlier about some people assuming that you're a satanic worshiper. So what do you have to say to people or potential listeners who do associate witchcraft with satanic worship?
All I can say is that personally, for myself, where I'm coming from with this is, please don't assume, because, you know, I'm a pagan. I do not have anything that has to do with Abrahamic faith. That belongs in the Abrahamic faith. I do not practice Christianity. I have nothing against Christians. I think I have wonderful Christian friends, but to set the record straight, there is no devil in my craft. What I do is simply from nature. That I always tell this to people. Do not assume I'm a satanic worshiper, because I am not. And I'm not saying that there aren't any, okay? But for me and my religion, no, there is no devil. That's in the Abrahamic faiths, not in my pagan faith.
Fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense to me when we keep in mind that you had said witchcraft and religion aren't necessarily hand in hand, and how there's all these different branches and everybody has different views. So I think that's a clarification that needs to be made about
Absolutely.
Not only religion and witchcraft, but that it's not all about necessarily just spirituality, but like you said, about the elements and about nature.
Well, for me, yes, and many others. I'm a pagan. Everything that has to do, if I'm with my witchcraft, has to do with paganism. I mix those two together. And like I said, there are some that don't. Some actually bring in their mainstream religions, such as Christianity, and some are atheists. Some are what we call secular witches. They have no deity at all within their practice. So it's really interesting. Like I said, it's a personal, individualized type of path. You're going to make it your own regardless, and it's going to be based on your personal philosophies, your morals, whatever you want to bring into it. That's what makes your craft. Yeah.
And so, to me, looking at this from a paranormal investigator, that to me points out another similarity that we have, because if you can interview 500 paranormal investigators, and they'll tell you 500 different ways of how they investigate, different tools they use. Some use things that others don't, different philosophies they have, different approaches, different beliefs, different religions. So I think this whole just field of the paranormal that I would classify both you and I and Wiccans and Druids and everybody else in is just so unique. It's just so not fixed, and you can define it in one way or give one example of it.
Absolutely, Sydney. Exactly. You nailed it right there. I mean, it's so many different practices, so many religions coming in, spiritual views, whatever have you. And you just have to make it your own. And, you know, like I said, witchcraft is about the same way. You know, you're bringing in your personal views, how you're connecting. You could have two witches in the room, and yes, we may cast spells and everything, but how we go about practicing our craft, who we may worship, how we do those practices are totally different. You know, some witches, they follow the moon cycle and the seasonal cycles, and some don't. You know, some say, I'm just going to cast a spell because I need to do this right now, for example. You know, I can't wait till the full moon, or I can't wait till the new moon cycle. So you have all these different interpretations and how people go about practicing and doing their own craft. And just like what you were saying, you're a paranormal investigator, you have different practices. You know, I know some paranormal investigators that pray and carry protection and the whole 9 yards before they even go out, you know. So absolutely. I mean, there's so much to this.
For sure. And I think it's important to just clarify that just because you do it a certain way and somebody else does it different doesn't make either of you wrong. It's just a different approach, a different mindset, and a different belief going into it. But I don't think that necessarily makes one person better or one person correct and the other person not correct. It's just a different, both methods work. It's just a different approach.
Exactly. You nailed it right there. Exactly. And the way I look at it is the universe, whatever have you, no religion is over another. everyone sees the divine, feels the divine, experiences the divine in different ways. And there is no incorrect, there is no correct way when you go to practice. There are guidelines at times, depending and within the craft. But overall in all, it's all about you and how you go about your personal practices and what and how you carry them out.
So to wrap up here, our episode is looking at the origins of Halloween. And we thought we would do that by talking with you and talking about the origins of witchcraft, because of course, when you think Halloween, a lot of people, aside from pumpkin pie and jack-o'-lanterns, they think witches. So how do you think we get this modern concept of witchcraft that we today associate with Halloween? How did those two things become married?
Well, this is going to be on my opinion only, but there's a lot of symbology. If you look at it, when Christianity came around, they were like, okay, well, we got to, as the religion was growing, they had to convert the rest of the pagans. And so a lot of Christianity, even though it's Christian, there are a lot of pagan roots. Look at your holidays. For Halloween, actually their Christianity actually had, during the summertime, that's when they worshiped their dead, they honored it, or their saints. And then they said, well, we need to convert the rest of these people over, and they made it where everybody could come over and become Christian, whatever, back in those days. But you see a lot of the symbology, like, for example, apples. Okay, apples are a big thing. People bob for apples, different things like that. And back in the day, apples were symbology of the afterlife, longevity, love, and women would actually sit back in the day, and they would cut up a piece of apple 9 times, and they would go in the dark and sit in front of a mirror and eat 9 apples, 9 slices of apples. And when they got to the 9th, they would look in the mirror and they would be able to foretell their husband, their future mate. Now, nowadays, we look at the apples as, something fun and harvesty. Well, that roots come from the Celtic, and that's some of the traditions that they did. Mask wearing, trick-or-treating. Back in Ireland, again, they had people that would come up to and it was a time that they would give back to the poor. Now, if your house did not give to them, well, they would play a trick on your home, and your house, you would have bad luck for a year. Okay, so that's where trick-or-treating, has its origins. So people would give back at those times. And like I said, there's more, like the pumpkin and all that. It was a turn up. They would put it outside their house. They would carve it to protect their home from evil spirits. Only the good spirits could get by, and the evil spirits would stay out. And we still have that symbology there. So there's a lot of roots in Halloween, where we're concerned, where witches and witchcraft and everything comes into. It's a whole lot more to it.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything else you would like for our listeners to know?
Well, I just want people to understand that, just don't assume that witches are bad. Remember that, a lot of your viewers don't understand it, and we're not looking for proof. But all we ask is, please respect our differences and how we go about practicing our spirituality, our faith, just like a lot of your viewers do. You go to church, we don't show up there, we don't show up there all the time and preach our gospel or anything. So the way I look at it is, please respect our differences and understand that, the divine comes differently to everyone, and just don't assume that we're bad when we're just normal people like you are. We just have more spirituality and magic in our roots regarding our spirituality. But, please, don't just assume that we're satanic. We practice this and that, because not all of us do. And we do we do look out for others. We really do. And we try to help other people, and that's some of us, including myself.
100%. Well, Harmony Harris, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I think we did sort through a lot of this foggy witchcraft stuff, and I'm hoping that our listeners will have a better understanding, because I know I for sure have a better understanding from talking with you about witchcraft and its involvement with the paranormal field.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes hand in hand. And like I said, just really have an open mind. You don't have to worship. We're not going to convert you, but I'm happy to educate more people. And I hope that more people are welcome to contact me at anytime. And I will be happy to answer some questions.
Absolutely. So we will include, if you would like for us, your Facebook link? Is that what's best for you?
We can do that. Absolutely. I also have a Gmail as well. But yeah, we can do that. I can contact you and give you all that information if you like.
Sure. I will put that in the description with our podcast here, so that if our listeners are looking for help that you can provide, they will be able to reach out to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would love to help.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again for speaking with us, and have a good night. Stay dry.
It has been a wet night. And thank you so much, Sydney, for giving me this opportunity to educate and enlighten some people out there about us.
For sure. Well, it's a pleasure.
A happy Halloween.
Speaking of Halloween, the history of Halloween is actually very interesting. It's mostly relies on Celtic origins. The really cool thing about this holiday is it was such a big deal that everyone was expected to be there. If you were not, the nobles would actually show up to your house and could imprison you. Another crazy thing about this holiday is they were so serious about it that you couldn't even commit crimes on this day. If you committed crimes, they were punishable by death. Even just petty things like theft. I mean, that would still be the death penalty for you, basically, which is very interesting. But basically, the way they would go about celebrating this day would be the family would go from their home in the morning time and leave their hearth to burn out. That's because later on at night, they would actually light a community hearth in the middle of town, and everybody would gather around it and just take a little piece from it and bring it back to their home to help welcome in the darkness, as they referred to it. They also would go out into their fields and leave different kinds of offerings to the different fairies that were out there, just because it was believed that at this time the veil between our worlds is so thin that their ancestors could actually come back and visit them. Another way that they would protect their homes was actually from carved turnips. So that's kind of where we get the whole jack-o'-lantern thing from.
All right. Thank you again very much, Harmony. So I do want to make one quick clarification here. I misspoke when we were talking about the Day of the Dead. My Spanish teacher from high school would kill me if she ever heard this. Day of the Dead is actually just celebrated in Mexico, not Spain. So I wanted to throw that out there. I will say that I think the part of the interview that caught my attention the most was the religious diversity amongst witches. And while spirituality isn't necessarily the focus of this podcast or the paranormal field, you can't entirely separate the two, because to understand the paranormal is to have some sort of understanding of in afterlife. Now, that doesn't mean simply Christianity or Catholicism, but any sort of spiritual belief.
Absolutely. I mean, what really caught my attention the most from what she was saying was the story of the Witch of Endor with King Saul and Samuel. And just to kind of touch on that story just a little bit more from my knowledge of that story, from reading it myself, this is where I really believe that especially Christians have a big misconception of witches and witchcraft. But I'll kind of get to that point here in a sec once I start telling the story. Whenever Samuel was alive, he actually had cast out all witches, all wizards, all mages, everything like that, because they were considered to be unholy. Well, after Samuel had passed, there was a war coming, and King Saul didn't know what to do because Samuel was his advisor. He was the one who talked to God, and God told him basically what to do. And so King Saul, freaking out, went to the Witch of Endor, and nobody realized really how big of a deal this was, but it was a huge deal because, like I said, Samuel had cast out all of those kinds of people. So when he went in a cloak, surrounded by very few guards to protect him, to this witch's house. And whenever she found out that it was him, she started freaking out because she thought he was there to kill her for being a witch. But he told her, no, it's nothing like that. I need your help. My advisor is dead. I don't know what to do. There's a war coming on my city. I just need help. And finally, after much debating, she finally agreed to help King Saul out. And when she did, two things happened. Number one, she did indeed pull Samuel back from the grave. However, Samuel was furious with her, absolutely furious for doing that to her, for doing that to him, excuse me. But then the next thing that happened, she accidentally opened a door to another world, basically, that let in all sorts of different things, and she was fearful of these things that she was seeing. But that's kind of where I believe the misconception comes from, because I wholeheartedly believe that it's not just witches that can do that sort of thing. It's absolutely anybody, which is why everybody always stresses so much to be so careful while you're investigating, especially with certain tools. But another thing that shocks me is it's the whole thing about how long it's taken. Like I said, it just surprises me that it's taken so long when America was supposed to be this big melting pot for all these different religions and beliefs and the land of opportunity. And finally, some folks started coming out as secular. They didn't believe what the church had to say. Well, that's when you really saw a rise in the Salem witch trials and people calling each other out for being witches. That's when you really start to see that progress. And it's because the church was the people in control, basically, and they wanted to keep that control. So it's absolutely wild to me that they did that to those poor people.
It is absolutely wild, and it's no wonder why people are so afraid of witches, especially on Halloween. They have been misrepresented for centuries, when in reality, they are just people like you and I who are just trying to bring about change.
Well, thank you for listening to I'm Not Afraid of the Dark with Sydney and JC. Be sure to tune in next time as we sit down with a very popular paranormal author.
Happy Halloween. Stay safe.
We are not afraid.